Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss and internet shitlords. And, well, let me say that it's pretty obvious that you guys really like videos about me talking about, what's wrong with the hobby or what the SJWs are up to, and not so much videos about me talking about my upcoming game or publishing and trying to get a publisher. So, because the last video I did where I revealed what the topic is going to be of my next big RPG project, and where I talked about, recruiting potential publishers for it, only got about like half the views of most of my videos. So people are just like, I don't care, I'll get it when it comes out or something like that. But anyway, that's okay. I am still working on the first draft of my big game, and I'm still in talks. I've had a few people approach me interested in potentially working with me to produce the physical layout of the next game that I'm doing. And if you're interested in that, get in touch with me. If you're an RPG publisher or have got experience in RPG publishing, let me know. And for everyone else, well, you can go back and watch that video if you haven't yet, or check out my other videos. And if this is your first time here, then please be sure to subscribe if you like this video, and hit the like button, and check out my products more than anything. You've got, I've got a PayPal and a Patreon that you can donate to, but if you want to get something for your money, then check out my games: Lion and Dragon, Dark Albion, Arrows of Indra, the Medieval Authentic Old School Companion, and Star Adventurer, and my RPG Pundit Presents series, which are 102 different PDFs that, and counting, there's going to be more, that are full of interesting stuff that you can use in your OSR, or D&D based, or even other fantasy RPGs. Oh, look, it's the meatball. And yeah, you can check those out. And, they all cost like between 99 cents and $4.99. So you can give me a tip, help me keep doing what I do, and at the same time you get something that you can use in your game. Anyways, well, now that I've front-loaded all that advertising, let me get to what the topic of today is. And here's the question, right? Like, if you're like me, and let's say you've DM'd RPGs, right? Especially, D&D. And if you've done that, and if this or one of the other early D&D games, I mean, I know that this is the new kind of deluxe reprint, but this is the first edition Player's Handbook, just with a fancy new cover. Got that as a bonus from Wizards of the Coast for my consulting work. So if this was your first game that you DM'd, how quickly was it before one of the player's characters died in that game? And I know for me, and probably for a lot of people, the answer would be in the first session, right? Somebody died before the first adventure was through. In the first dungeon you ever ran, somebody probably died, right? But here is the difference between the old school and new school D&D, which is that apparently that's something that's having a really big cultural effect, and it got represented in a single tweet that came across my path the other day. That is just, it kind of blew my mind, because it exemplified all of the biggest problem, as far as I can tell, in new school D&D and the culture around new school D&D, of people who are new school D&D players, all in one tweet. And because I'm not a fancy tech guy, I'm not going to put up a screenshot or something like that of the tweet. You can find it if you want in my Twitter account, but because I quote it and say basically what I just said about it, that it exemplifies all of the problem with new school D&D in one tweet. But I'm going to read it out to you right now. So this is a woman who has obviously started on 5th edition, and who it is doesn't really matter. She's not, I didn't quote it because it's such and such person said this. In fact, the whole point is that it's somebody I don't really know, and that isn't somebody famous in the hobby. It's just a regular person who has started running D&D. And here's the tweet, okay? I'm quoting verbatim, right? Today, in D&D, I, ... the DM, ... killed my first player character. Crying emoji, crying emoji, crying emoji. On our 2-year gameversity. In a random encounter I didn't think would be that bad. I don't know if it counts since he was brought back to life the next day, but okay. So this is, if you think about this, right, this is the whole problem. It's the difference between new school and old school, and it's why, I think that without knowing, like this person said this in all seriousness, and it's because they know not what they do, right? They don't know another way. They don't know a better way, right? So here you had a DM of 5th edition D&D who was all broken up over the fact that a player character died, as if this is something that's not supposed to happen. That you as a DM are in fact supposed to prevent this happening, right? She says, it was a random encounter. I didn't think it would be that bad, right? Like as if you're supposed to be making sure that in the random encounters, or in any encounters actually, player characters shouldn't have to die, right? And she did this. This was on their 2-year gameversity. Now, who knows how many sessions were played in those 2 years? I mean, if it was 1 session a week, right, that means she did 110 sessions without anybody dying. So the first 2 years, one way or the other, the first 2 years of her career as a DM, she didn't have a single player character death, right? And I mean, it could have been once a month, right? But that still would be 24 sessions. Even if it was once every 2 months that they played, that would still be 12 sessions, right? And that is it's just a whole other universe. It's a whole other way of doing things, and I would argue a tremendously inferior way of doing things from the way of the OSR game, right? And the old school gaming, the old school D&D, right? And then just the final kicker, the punchline is, and we brought him back the next day, and then right, even there, I think there's like an undertone of realizing the meaninglessness of that death, because not only was it almost impossible in 2 years of gaming for anyone in this person's campaign to die, but when someone dies 24 hours later in the game, they're brought back to life, right? Now, I've just admitted in this very video that I was, and I think I've mentioned it to people before, I helped make this version of D&D, right? I was a consultant on 5th edition, and now in the interest of absolving myself from guilt in all of this, I want to point out that I had begged. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I had really hoped that what I would get is some kind of closer balance. I said, one of the things you need to do is not make it so hard to die. And I'm talking about like compared to what it was in 3rd, right? Because I thought in 3rd it was already bad, right? You shouldn't make it so hard to die, and you shouldn't make it so easy to raise the dead, because those things reduce the quality of the game experience. And of course they didn't listen to me. Like if I had had my way, like I knew this wasn't going to happen, but I tried to make a case for it anyways when I was consulting. It would have been much slower to heal damage. You wouldn't have had this like short rest and it just make it so easy to heal. I would have gotten rid of these checks versus death, which make it like really, really, really difficult for a person to actually die even when they're dropped, and I would have made resurrection into something really rare. Now, I don't even like raise dead magic in old school D&D, right? Because I think that after a certain level it becomes just too easy to do. But there is a huge world of difference between what this does and what this does, right? And to say nothing of what this does. In Lion and Dragon basically has the survivability of what I would have loved to see be done in D&D. And that would have made a totally different game. It would have made a game where people would have really had felt that there were stakes, that there were things at stake, right? That there was a risk involved. And in Lion and Dragon, first of all, healing is much more rare. Clerics can lay on hands, they can try to heal a person, but not every cleric can. It's a miracle, so it depends on what miracles the cleric randomly gets. And there is medicine, and there are herbs that allow you to heal gradually, right? You heal a certain amount of hit points each day. You can heal more if you're being treated by someone with skill in medicine or herbalism and has the right herbs. And so that can give you a bit of help. But generally speaking, it takes time to recover from injuries. And you don't have ubiquitous healing potions everywhere. You didn't have that in old school D&D either. Healing potions were not uncommon as magic, but they weren't something that you could just get anywhere. The real problem started, with the new school in 3rd edition, where it was presumed that there was a magic store in every little town and that you could just buy potions of healing everywhere, right? It was an assumption. It was a combination of both changes in the system and changes in the presumed setting of the game. And likewise, resurrection. In Lion and Dragon, it's pretty much impossible to resurrect. When you're dead, you're dead, and that's it. I guess there could be theoretically some epic, religious relics that could raise you from the dead. And maybe some sinister magics that could do that too, but just with at a really terrible cost for your soul for starters. But moving on from there, whatever you become won't really be human anymore. But that's the only real ways you can achieve that. And what that means is your character's life matters, right? In D&D 5th edition, no character's life matters because it's so hard for them to die, and if they die, it's so easy for them to be brought back to life that it becomes irrelevant. I've been watching the new series of Brave New World, and of course the book itself is excellent. The new series is actually not that bad. I was really worried that it was going to be a complete mess, but it is funny because I don't know how many of you have read Brave New World, but Brave New World presents a very different kind of dystopia from a book like 1984, right? In 1984, you have the more classic concept of a dystopia, of this absolutely brutal totalitarian state that forces you, it grinds you into the ground, right? And obviously, there are parts of that we have seen. I mean, when Orwell wrote 1984, a lot of what he was basing it on was his own experiences of what the Stalinists did within the Republican-held territories in the Spanish Civil War, where Orwell was, right? He saw this firsthand. He saw what they would become if they won. And so there was a historical element to that. And of course, in the modern world, we can see elements of that sort of brutality in a lot of what the SJWs do, right? Where they want to destroy your life if you don't obey, right? That sort of thing. But Brave New World is in some ways much more prescient because it presents a dystopia that looks at first glance like a utopia, right? Everybody's happy because they're constantly on drugs, right? Everybody has all the sex they like because there's no such thing as families and there's no such thing as as actual romantic relationships, right? People are entertained by, pre-created, that was Big Chungus that just went by, of course, by prefabricated diversions that are done with electronics and things like that. It's basically by the things that are diversions for us today. In many ways, we are living, or at least people who have completely fallen into the postmodern paradigm, where nothing actually matters. Entertainment is available at the touch of a screen, and drugs are readily used to treat any kind of sense of ennui or philosophical doubt, or just antisocial behavior. these are all things that were predicted in Brave New World. And very much so, the world in which the person that wrote that tweet inhabits, the world of 5th edition D&D, is the Brave New World of the D&D experience, right? It's D&D done in the Brave New World, where you're protected, where you're entertained, but none of it means anything, right? And that is the most crushing oppression of all, because not only doesn't it mean anything, but it's implied that it's not allowed to mean anything, right? If you wanted to have a game where your character's life was at risk and everybody else's was at risk, where life and death actually mattered, then that would be at the very least a kind of a social crime, right? And in fact, there have been a lot of people, obviously some old school people responded to this tweet. Now this is the funny thing. Most of the people that responded to this tweet, hey Big Chungus, it's Big Chungus. Most of the people that responded to this tweet were fellow 5th edition people, and they were responding by like, oh my god, that's so terrible, I feel so sorry for you, like this had been like a terrible, terrible experience that this DM had in accidentally killing a player character, right? One of them actually said, oh yeah, the first time for me was just, in like my 2nd or 3rd campaign, and I remember how much I cried, right? Like these people were broken up by the fact that a player character actually died, But of course, there were also some old school people that wrote back and were, saying, I don't get this, why are you acting this way? What's wrong with you people, right? And they were responding to us, oh, how dare you try to judge us, like your idea of you saying, oh, that this is the right way to play, this is just offensive to us, right? Like it's like not only, like that's the greatest dystopia of all, right? When a person not only doesn't realize how they've had all meaning stripped from their experience, but they also will viciously fight against the discomfort that comes with having meaning, right? Like that if your experience in life or in RPGs has actual risk, that creates discomfort, right? You don't feel safe because you could die, right? And bad things could happen. So if like a Big Chunk is struggling to get on top of the microwave there, but if you have a risk of life or death, a risk that you can lose the game in some sense, right? If you want to understand having a character die as kind of failing, that doesn't feel as good in the most shallow and infantile sense, right? Like we all know, obviously, even from the old school days, the player who would have like this gigantic tantrum if his character died, right? That sort of childishness, right? And that's something that these players are largely protected from in the new school now. But the effect is that they're all just, consistently mollycoddled tantrum babies. Right? They're just not, they don't have tantrums because their characters don't die, because the game system protects them from that. And they don't realize that at the same time, it means that the level of intensity and meaning that a game that has stakes would provide is something they've never experienced, and they're afraid to experience, and they reject those experiences because they somehow think that's going to feeling not safe is going to be it's an offense to them, right? They believe that they're entitled to feel constantly safe in everything they do. And we see that in all aspects of culture, right? D&D is just a microcosm for that. So how do we fix this? Well, I don't know. I've heard more so in more recent times as we're going along that there are more and more people who start with 5e. Now, mind you, this is a very tiny minority of 5e players, right? But they're there. And it's starting to happen. That started with 5e, and eventually they kind of hear about these older versions of the game. They hear about stuff like the OSR, and then they come on board and they switch back into the OSR, right? Or in their case, switch for the first time to the OSR. And it's like a mind-blowing experience for them, right? The ones that are there, the brave ones, the ones that are the outliers of the the mollycoddled culture that the entire postmodern West has devolved into. Suddenly, like, there's this excitement of being able to play a game where it's actually, meaningful, where there's actually things that matter that happen to your character, and where your character can succeed or fail, right? And for them, it's just this awakening. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of that over time. But I know that for a lot of the people, including the person who wrote this tweet clearly, for a lot of people that are playing 5th edition D&D, they feel like that is exactly what they want, because it's what they've been indoctrinated to want in every aspect of their lives for their whole existence up till now, right? I don't know how old this person is, probably, in the teens or 20s, most likely, maybe early 30s, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to guess. But they've clearly spent most of their life being told that what they want is to have this shallow kind of no-risk entertainment to distract them from their shallow, no-risk lives where there are no stakes for them, right? And they demand that there be no stakes. They demand that they be kept safe, whatever the cost, not realizing that the great cost is to themselves and to their own souls, right? So, we're going to be stuck with that, but we can create a badass counterculture and try to get as many people as we can to understand the value of being risk takers and of being people who are willing to go against that programming that the directors of this brave new world want for them. And in that sense, yes, the OSR is a very dangerous subversive organization. So I guess that's it for today. I've already given you the spiel, but I'll remind you again, please subscribe. And if you like this video, please share it anywhere where it might help someone, including 5e players who might realize that there's another way to go, or where it'll piss off people, because that's fun too, right? So thank you everyone for watching. By the way, this Sunday we're having another episode of Inappropriate Characters, so join me and Job and Venger there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Here comes Big Chungus once again. Just one more pass there to say hello to all the viewers. And that's everything for today. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Chiet plus Argento Latacchia.